Well, we are so happy to be here. Lauren came and we talked a little bit earlier today about the exciting things we're going to talk about. So we're going to get to them. This is Lauren Ross. That's Lauren Ross. And basically we've set up you guys have talked, the audience has sent in questions, and we talked about some of the questions that we're going to talk about. One of the things that came up is what does it mean to be the inaugural curator at the ICA?
Yeah, okay.
What does it mean? What does an inaugural curator do?
Right. Well, the ICA, the Institute for Contemporary Art, or ICA, is an entirely new institution. So I think a lot of people know that we are building a building, but we are a brand new institution that is really in startup mode. And so being the first curator for a new institution, I think, presents a set of challenges because I'm not being hired by a museum where there's already a long established history or an established exhibition program or established way of doing things. So really, it's a chance to shape the program at the ICA and what it will be. And, in fact, I would say that the ICA is so much in startup mode that really everyone on our staff, we're all serving as, inaugural, whatever, fill in our titles, because we're sort of shaping this institution at the same time that we're preparing to open the doors. So it really does present a set of opportunities and challenges at the same time.
So let's talk a little bit about your experience and your background, what got you here, right? So you were the curator of contemporary art at the Philbrook Museum in Tulsa. You were also the inaugural curator for the High Line in New York City. You were curator at the Brooklyn Museum of Art, and you were the director of the alternative art space, White Column.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So, that's a lot of experience, and you're bringing that here. And, how do you see, your position here different than your position in those locations? In terms of what are you going to be doing that's different, and what kinds of things are you bringing with you that are going to inform that?
Right. Well, and as you mentioned, I am the first curator for the ICA, and in some of those other positions, similarly, I sort of came in as the first, the inaugural curator for the High Line, for example. So I've sort of been through this experience before, but every institution is different, and so it's really never the same thing twice. I feel that I've really worked at sort of an eclectic group of all of those places that you mentioned are visual art spaces, or I've been involved in curating visual art, but they're all really different types of institutions. So, an alternative space is really a very different kind of space than a university museum, which is different from a collecting museum, which is different from a non-collecting museum, which is different from a public park.
Sure.
So, one of the things that I think I have to think about, is really part of my job, is to think about audiences and how those different spaces might attract different types of audiences, or how even perhaps the same audiences might enter those different types of spaces with a different set of expectations.
And let's talk a little bit about the High Line.
Okay.
Right? Now, I told you that I invented the High Line.
You mentioned that,
in 2003, I had proposed a project to do something on the High Line and made a few phone calls, and it didn't work. So you have more experience with the actual High Line. And maybe we should explain a little bit about what the High Line is.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it's most people know about it, but not everybody.
Right. So the High Line is a structure that was built as an elevated freight train line that ran down, when it was active, ran down the west side of Manhattan, and it was a link between upstate New York and New York City. It was not for passenger trains. I think a lot of people think that because New York City did have elevated passenger trains at one time, and there's still some sections where, if you're riding on the subway, it comes out above ground. But the High Line was a freight train line, and it was, it's been years since I've talked about this, so I don't know if I get my dates exactly right, but it was constructed in the late 1920s, so it was really used actively for freight between, say, about 1930 and 1980.
And meat, right?
Yes. So right, exactly. So it goes down. Right now, it terminates in the meatpacking district. It actually used to go even further south than that. But yes, among the goods that were brought along the High Line were animals who were brought to the meatpacking district for slaughter or for distribution. And in fact, the legend is that the very last line, the very last shipment that ran on the line before it was closed in 1980 was turkeys being brought down, Thanksgiving turkeys. Really, so after World War II, when the interstate highway system was developed in the U.S., trucking really took over in terms of moving freight, and the trains were used less and less frequently, and then just the line was shut down, and then that structure sat vacant for decades. Really throughout the 80s and 90s, there was debate about what to do with it. And it sat there not actively, because it wasn't in active use. What happened was that grasses and plants and flowers, wild plants, just started to grow there. And
that's what I was responding to when I saw it. I was like, I want to grow something on that. It's such an amazing place. And it really was an artist who made the thing happen.
Exactly. I mean, Friends of the High Line, which is the group that I worked for, started as a grassroots movement. Really, two people who met at a community board meeting at which the fate of the structure was being discussed, came together and said, we really should kind of start a movement to save this, and it grew from there. And so the inspiration to turn it into a park came from the fact that nature was growing there, and it was sort of like this elevated meadow in the heart of the city. And so, fast forward, there was a design competition, and, it's an incredible amount of work happened in a relatively short period of time.
When did it open?
In 2009. Yeah.
So it's a park. Mm-hmm. So what's a curator doing there?
Right. So good question. So the concept for the High Line was always that art would play a role in that space, and I think for a few reasons. One is because New York City has is a cultural capital, and it's a big part of the identity of the city to function that way. And the neighborhoods that the High Line runs through, including Chelsea, are have a huge concentration of galleries and at one time artist studios, not really so much anymore, but design studios and other creative industries. And so they were, it's running through these creative neighborhoods that are known for places to see and experience art and performance and theater. And so there was always a desire to have a very strong public art component as part of the park experience. And because the idea was not just to do, one project and leave it alone, but to really have this be an ongoing part of the park experience. An
active, living art
exactly. That the organizers realized that the park actually needed its own curator.
Yeah.
So I was actually hired a month before the park opened, so that did give me a lot of time to start the.
That's what inaugural curators do, right? Yeah. It doesn't exist. Make it happen.
It doesn't exist. Make it happen.
Now.
So right. So that was part of the job. Yeah.
So I'm showing a slide from an art project by British artist Richard Galpin. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that? This
Sure,
is
yeah.
the project that you curated, correct?
Yes, that's right. So, so one of the things that seemed immediately apparent to me when I was faced with this challenge of doing art on the High Line was that, right away it was decided very easily that the artwork should be temporary and not permanent for a whole host of reasons. It's more practical, it's easier, it makes the program more interesting because it's always changing. But I also thought it was really important that the art be site responsive and site specific. And it's also really difficult to borrow any work of art from an artist and then put it outdoors in a very uncontrolled setting and then be able to make any kind of promise about what sort of condition it will be in when it goes back to the artist. So it seemed important to me that rather than borrowing things, that really we should be commissioning new things, and that also makes it more exciting. You're seeing things that you won't see anywhere else. So during the 2 years that I was the curator for the High Line, I commissioned 9 new projects as well as coordinated projects with other organizations like Creative Time, for example. So Richard Galvin.
Is that Richard? The image of him looking.
Yes, I believe you can't see his face, but I believe that is Richard.
That's his eye.
Yeah.
That looks like a great Instagram portrait or something.
Yeah, exactly. So Richard is an artist based in London, and actually we had never met, but I'd seen his work and really admired it, and so I reached out to him. And Richard is, or at least at the time, was best known for taking photographs of architectural spaces and then making a color print and then using a scalpel to cut and then peel back the top layer of emulsion on the photo, exposing areas of the paper substrate and abstracting the views into really almost unrecognizable compositions. And so I knew he couldn't, they're actually really delicate prints that have been cut, and I knew we couldn't show those outdoors. So I reached out to him and I asked him if he had ever done public art, and he said no. And I said, have you ever thought about doing public art? And he said yes, and it went from there. Yeah. And so he created this piece called Viewing Station, which is composed of a post with, you see a box on top of the post, and there's an aperture in there, and it looks perhaps like there might be a lens in there, but it's not. It's just a hole. And then when you bend over and look through the hole, your view lines up with that screen that you see, which has shapes cut out of it. And the whole thing is very, very deliberately positioned to line up your view with the buildings on the other side of 10th Avenue. And so it abstracts your view of the buildings across the street. So essentially, the viewing station, ended up replicating the look of one of his photos, but with, but in real space, real time, with an actual view onto the work. And so it's funny because I think, site-specific is a term that gets applied a lot to work, but this piece was truly site-specific in the most literal sense. Yes. Because, in fact, after the piece came down, it had to be destroyed because it literally won't function in any other site. It was designed for that exact spot and that exact view of the buildings across the street.
And I just heard something that I want to make sure that the audience knows, these future artists, is when a curator asks if you've ever thought about doing public art, the answer is always yes. Yeah. I've been thinking quite a bit about it. Yeah. When can we talk about it?
Yeah, I'll get back to you.
Yeah. So, one of the things I am thinking about, so in regards to the High Line, but it also relates into to what the ICA is about, right? Mm-hmm. So I'd like to know what you think about public art, right? When people think about public art, we live in a city of monuments, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So when I think of, when we think of public art, do we think of giant statues on Monument Avenue? Mm-hmm. Or certainly with the things that are happening on the High Line, we're looking at these temporary site-specific things that interact with the built environment.
Right.
So, what are you going to bring from your High Line experience to the ICA and also the Richmond community? So, mm-hmm. I'm showing a slide right now of the low line, proposal, which is it's underneath an elevated railroad track, and they're already starting to build that here in Richmond.
Right.
Have you had any interaction with them?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah. I met with the organizers, and actually, well, only just once, and I would love to meet with them again. But they wanted to pick my brain a little bit about public art. I think that this type of repurposing of old industrial spaces is brilliant, and there's a reason why there are so many projects that are similar to the High Line that are now popping up all over the country. And I should say the High Line itself actually was inspired by a space in Paris called the Promenade Plantée. So it's this idea has kind of been in the works for a while. But I think repurposing of public space to just use it better is really important. And I think not all spaces have to have public art necessarily, but I think it makes the spaces more dynamic, more interesting. And I talked a moment ago about how art and culture is a big part of the identity in New York City, and I would say that I would say the same thing about Richmond, and it's not true of every city. I think there's such a strong creative community here that it's really important. And I think in the relatively short time I've been in Richmond, I've sensed a bit of frustration with the kind of public art that exists here, because it is so kind of old-fashioned, that it's really the very traditional idea of equestrian monuments, and I think even permanent art is problematic. It's I think temporary public art is it's so much more interesting. It can be so much more responsive to places and times.
Yeah, let's talk about the temporary nature of. So you're talking when you talk about. I think when you talk about alternative art spaces, like you're working with artists of a caliber whose work is not as precious. When you're talking about the work on the High Line, it's work that's out in public. It's going to be damaged. It's probably going to be destroyed by something. So how does that inform? So I guess I'd like to know about how is the ICA different than something like the VMFA? How is it going to be different?
Yeah.
We have this big, beautiful art museum. It's got a great building. They've got some modern art.
Right.
What's the ICA going to do and be about that isn't something that we already know? What's
right.
About it?
Well, I think one of the big differences between working on something temporary and working on something permanent is that the temporary model, the alternative model that you're talking about, encourages risk-taking. And I think that the ICA will be a place where we also encourage risk-taking.
Yes.
And I think, we're even challenging ourselves in terms of thinking about how we, as, staff people, as administrators, can take risks and not, it's sort of funny to be in this position of defining your art program, but I know I personally feel a resistance to defining it, because as soon as you define it, you're putting limits on it. Sure. So I think, I talked earlier about how, different types of institutions function differently and people bring different sets of expectations to them. So when you are a collecting museum, and especially when you're an encyclopedic collecting museum like the VMFA,
sure.
You're really taking this long view of history. Their collection spans from antiquities to contemporary. And, there's an emphasis on preserving those things for the future and on scholarship and on, as I said, sort of taking the long view. Whereas a contemporary art space that doesn't have a collection like the ICA or others like it, various ICAs around the country, or MOCAs, or, Kunsthalles, they're sometimes referred to, are really about the program always changing, being dynamic, being fresh. It's not necessarily about building, we're collecting for the future, and being more experimental and risk-taking. And I will say one other thing, in terms of talking about public art. The ICA, we have this building that's under construction, and that's going to be our home, and that's
we're looking at the whole right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this,
I mean, what's it like to be a curator without a
without a building?
Yeah.
Well, there is a building; it's just not finished yet. But yeah, I think it's important to us that the building is going to get tons of attention, and we're incredibly excited about it. And it's being designed by a preeminent architect. But at the same time, I would say the ICA is not just a building. We're more than just the building, and so we plan, even after the building is open, to go out into the community and not limit ourselves to working within our own walls.
And do you think being in like a renovated taco shop now has like made you guys really think about how to engage with the community in Richmond and DCU? And it's one of the things that we're focused on, is how to get
Right.
people involved in the arts. What kinds of things are you doing to do that in advance of the
Right.
of the start of the building?
Yeah,
The
no,
opening.
exactly. I think
And will you answer when the building's going to open and give us a date certain?
2017.
Okay. And what day?
It'll be a Tuesday.
Oh,
No.
okay, good.
I can't say. I don't. With construction, I think it's always.
I know. I know you can't answer, but I'll keep asking.
2017. It's not that far off. But yeah, we have been doing projects in advance of the building opening, to help build awareness that the ICA is coming, and to build excitement, and also to reinforce this message that it's not just the ICA is not just the building. So I think we even have some images of some projects.
So what I did is I pulled a slide from the Near Evron exhibition that you curated. So that was an exhibition that was housed in the Depot building and was hosted here at the Depot.
Right. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that exhibition, how it got here, and
Sure.
then I also wanted to talk a little bit about the educational mission. I don't know if the audience knows, but Near Efron not only was included in this exhibition, and the first exhibition that the ICA officially hosted, but he was also a visiting professor in the Department of Photography for the semester.
That's right.
So he was here for 3 months before the show even opened.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So Nir Evron is an Israeli artist. He lives in Tel Aviv, and I saw his work on a trip to Israel in 2012, and was just blown away by his work, and knew immediately that I wanted to work with him. And at the time, I was a curator at the Philbrook Museum in Tulsa, and so I organized an exhibition of his work for Philbrook. And actually, that show is, the largest showing of Nir's work in the U.S. To date. And while I was working on that exhibition, I got the job at the ICA and made the move.
You carried it with you.
I carried it with me. So, so I knew right away that I wanted to bring his work to Richmond. I mean, it was such I was really excited about the project and showing his work, and knew the ICA wouldn't be finished yet, and so started looking for a space almost on day one, and then the gallery at the Depot made perfect sense. And one of the nice things about the Depot is actually that space is a little bit larger than the space I was working with at Philbrook, so we actually got to expand the exhibition a little bit and show some more work, and also give it a little more breathing room. But I think one of the major differences between the presentation of that exhibition at Philbrook versus here was the residency component, that, you know, being at a university and at a university with an art school, that, and it all came together actually very quickly. It fell into place really in a wonderful way. We brought him here for the entire fall 2015 semester. So he lived in Richmond from August to December. The exhibition opened in November. And it gave us a lot more opportunity to do programming in around the exhibition. He was teaching a graduate seminar while he was here. He was also meeting with undergrad students, and
I met with a graduate student today who's finishing her MFA this semester, and could not say enough things about Nir. I mean, he really had an impact on all of my graduate students' work.
That's and that's good to hear.
So I'm hoping that this is a model.
And I think the experience actually, it was a really I think very fruitful experience for him as well, because he's a professor and he's been teaching since 2007, but he teaches undergrad classes, and at first I think the idea of doing a graduate seminar, he was a little bit like, oh, I don't know. And I think it was such an incredible experience for the students and for him that, there was learning on both sides.
Yeah.
And normally with a museum exhibition, and especially when you're showing an artist from overseas, they fly in and they're in town maybe a week. They install and then they open, and then you take them out to dinner, and then maybe they do a talk on opening day, and then they leave, and that's about it. And so, obviously having the artist for an entire semester opens up so many more possibilities for engagement and gives students so much more access. And so, yes, it's definitely a model that we want to continue for sure.
And just photographers, right?
Only photographers. No, we definitely, we want to connect with, across departments across the School of the Arts, but actually we want to connect throughout the university.
Yes.
And so I think that's an interesting challenge for the ICA. It's very organic to connect with photography and film, or connect with painting and sculpture, and painting and printmaking. But one of the really interesting challenges, I think, for our staff is, how are we going to connect with the med school? How are we going to connect with people across the campus and across the city?
Can you talk a little bit? I think I have some slides from the Mixed Green Show, New Dominion. Can you talk a little bit about that? So that was an exhibition that was...
So there's another project in advance of opening to...
was that an... I mean, that wasn't an official ICA exhibition, or...
Yeah. It was just not in Richmond, but... This was an opportunity that came up. So Mixed Greens Gallery in Chelsea, New York City. I've known the people there for a long time, and have actually worked with some of the artists, some of the gallery artists. And in the spring of 2015, they reached out to me, or maybe it was very, very early 2015. They reached out and asked me to curate the summer show. So it was kind of short notice, but they were the ones who actually came up with the idea of they said, why don't you organize an exhibition of artist space in Richmond? And so immediately I was like, yes, that was interesting to me, because, I hadn't, at that point, I'd only been living in Richmond for a few months, but it's immediately apparent when you come here that, there's a lot of talent here. So it was a chance to showcase just, a tiny sort of sample of the artistic talent in Richmond, and, have that kind of connection and dialogue between New York and Richmond, because I think actually, Richmond has a sort of strong New York connection, and so, show Richmond artists there, make people there more aware of what's happening here. Sure. So it just sort of seemed like a win-win.
And you included people like Hope Ginsberg.
Yeah, so there were 8 artists in the exhibition, and most of them are affiliated with VCU. I think that's not unusual. When you look at the art scene here in Richmond, VCU is, of course, such a major player in the art scene. So I think 6 of the artists are faculty here, and including Hope Ginsberg, and Arnold Kemp, and Sonia Clark, and we're scrolling through images, and John Fryer.
And me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was in it too.
You were.
So is this the part of the conversation where I have to talk about me?
Yeah. Now we're going to switch to you. So you showed.
Did students send you lists of questions for you?
They didn't. I should have asked them to. So John, you showed your free ice water project,
Yes.
which it's a project you've been working on for some time now, and it has various iterations. So you want to talk about that and the evolution?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I will just say that one thing that the Mixed Green show did for me is it took a project that takes place in lots of different locations and placed it squarely like in a gallery context. Which is not where it came from, although, it was interesting to see how it existed in that iteration. I could talk a little bit about, so the project originally comes out of my experience in recovery, and the basic gist of the project is I encourage people to sit down and have face-to-face conversations over jars of ice cold water, not unlike this blue mason jar.
Right.
And if we were making the piece, this would have a lot more ice. And at the end of our conversation, we'd sign and seal the lid and make an art object out of it. But
Right.
I don't think that's what we're doing today. So yeah. So it comes out of that experience of being in deep conversation with people in my experience in recovery. And it was something that I wanted to share with other people and encourage other people to have conversations.
Right.
So in the gallery setting, what would happen is there was a suitcase that had a collection of jars. There was a table and chairs that were set up in the gallery, and then there was a row of shelves with various jars that some were filled and some not. And as the exhibition went on, conversations that happened across the table were then signed and sealed into those jars and placed on the shelf.
Right. So there was a challenge there for you, because normally the conversation is between you and another person, but the exhibition ran for 6 weeks and it was New York City and you couldn't be there the whole time. So you had to find a way to translate that experience or make that experience work without you being present.
Me being there. And I had, in fact, my experience working earlier with the ICA, that was a real change for the project, which was that it really externalized the project from me to other people, and it made me think about the role that other people play in my work. So I'm an artist who works, in the field of social practice, and I do all kinds of projects that are interactive. But the pushing it so that it isn't me. I'm setting it up. I'm setting up the playground equipment, and then people are interacting with it. It also, one of the things that I'm really interested in is the kind of ambiguous place that objects are in, and especially art objects. And, post ready-made, like there is an object that is an art object, and there's an object that is a cup of coffee, and sometimes they're the same thing. So I'm really interested in like what art is and what objects can become. And when people interact with this project by having a conversation with each other and they sign and seal that lid, they're acknowledging that there's some sort of transformation happening to that object.
Right. But yet you're not really precious about what happens to that object after the conversation is over.
So one person will share it with the other person. Maybe they'll take it and it's transformed and it's somewhere on their shelf. Or maybe they dump it out and use it as a beautiful glass, which is what I did. I'm not sure whose precious conversation this is, but I rinsed it out.
You rinsed it out.
It's a renewable resource, so yeah, I don't really make things as an artist, but I appreciate things. So I mean, the object of the mason jar as this container is really interesting to me, and it's a beautiful thing. So you know, it's something you might want to hang on to.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was a shift to do the piece in a gallery, and yet you didn't only present the piece in the gallery. You hit the streets of New York.
Oh, so yeah, you know, I mean, part of the project is this idea of the gift economy as well, and so on any day that went above 90 degrees, they put out
which was most days, I think.
Most days in Chelsea, there was this oasis of this 25-gallon ice water tank, and then. That's something that was during the bike race here, I brought back, and the Office of Sustainability supported the creation of 8 of these water stations that were all over the town, all over the city. So yeah, you know, part of it is you know, the simple gesture of offering ice water on hot days.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So. And you know, one thing I'm also interested in is so there's a conversation that happens over this jar. I'm not there, so there's no record of it. And I ask people to send me updates about the things that they talked about, or anything about their experience. So people will, you know, there's an image here of somebody who wrote me a letter on the instruction packet that I provided in the gallery. And then also people will contact me via the internet. You know, and one of the main components of my project is to have people sit down and have face-to-face, one-on-one conversations.
And put away their phones.
So what the step 2 is like turn off your phone, put it away.
Right.
So, and then after you're done having a distraction-free, internet-less conversation, you should tweet and email it to me.
Right. So, but that's not a conflict for you.
No, my practice has always been about engaging an audience outside of the physical space that I occupy. Right. So, you know, one project that I did when I was in graduate school in Iowa was this project, All My Life for Sale. And it was my effort to get the hell out of Iowa City, Iowa, after being there for about 6 weeks, right? And I decided to sell off all of my stuff and leave, and it turned into this project. So, and it was a project that took place on eBay, where I photographed all of the objects that were in my little Midwestern apartment, listed them for sale on eBay, and sold them to the highest bidder.
So, but it's interesting, you know, thinking about free ice water versus selling your life on eBay, because, you know, there's similarities there in terms of the exchange and the transaction being the basis of the work, although the eBay project is a very commercial transaction.
It's monetary.
It's monetary.
I would argue that it's nominal.
You didn't get rich doing that?
I made $6,000. That was what my life was worth. Not very much.
That must be just a strange experience too, like actually putting a number on this is what your life is worth.
But that didn't include my student loan debt, so actually I'm still in the hole.
Whereas now the exchange is very much the fact that it's free is a huge.
That's a huge component
part of free ice water.
It says it. It says it all.
It's part of the name,
right? It's part of the name, and that's also something. I mean, every project I do is exactly what it sounds like. Right? So allmylifeforsale.com. I know what that is. Freeicewater.com. I know what that is.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah. What else do you want to know?
No, well, I think I'm fascinated with the idea of the exchange and the transaction and that being a basis for art. And you talked about. I think one of the things about free ice water that I find so interesting is that it's rooted both in this sort of relational aesthetics, art practice that involves exchange, but also in the culture of recovery, and I just think it's so interesting the way you've meshed those two things and found common ground between them.
Maybe I went into recovery and stopped being such a capitalist and embraced the gift economy.
Right.
Learning that, in face-to-face, one-on-one exchanges, there's value in it that you can't sell.
Right.
So what else do you want to know?
We have a prompt there.
What is that? That's, they're objects. So that's a can of chunky soup.
Okay.
And each object had a little story. So I learned to cook when I was in college at a hippie cooperative.
Okay.
Right? I lived in a co-op with a bunch of hippies, and I never learned to cook because some of my students will tell you that I almost burned down my kitchen when I was 5, so they didn't let me cook. But I learned to cook in college, cooking for 40 people, and I learned a very important lesson, which is do not multiply spices. So if you are making chicken with 40 garlics for 40 people, you should multiply it by 10 and make chicken with 400 garlics. Because you will be the only one eating that chicken. Okay. And the advantage is I didn't get sick for the remaining part of the year. No. Okay. So that was attached to that. So imagine yourself on eBay searching for a can of chunky soup. I don't know why. And the description of the can of chunky soup is that story.
Okay.
So I really wasn't making money.
Right.
And it wasn't about selling, and neither, and obviously ice water is about the stories and the people that I interact with.
Right.
And the thing that happened out of that project was I traveled around the country visiting all the people that bought my craft. So, and that's something that continues. I like to meet people face to face, but I like to connect with them, through the interconnected ways that we are connected in this world. Right. So.
And you stay in touch with some of those people as well.
Sure. In fact, one of the people that bought something from me runs a recovery program in South Carolina, and I'm in regular contact with, and wants to bring free ice water to South Carolina. So, yeah. She bought a box from me, an empty box.
So you're going to take it on the road. Take it down there.
Take it on the road. So what else do you want to know?
I want to know what you're working on now.
Oh, yeah.
What's next?
So what is next? So one of the problems with me is ongoing projects. All my projects are these kind of ongoing things. Right? This project, Ice Water, will go on until I'm totally and completely bored with it. But I'm starting this project that's called 5-cent Coffee. Can you guess what that's about?
Does this have anything to do with it?
Well, it does. It does. So 5-cent Coffee is the yin, is the yang to the yin. Yin and yang. Is the yang to the yin of free ice water. Free ice water. So this is some coffee. Now this is from alchemy, which is fine. Would you like to try some?
Sure.
You take milk.
I don't have 5 cents on me, but
no, you don't have to. I'll give it to you. Again, 5 cents.
Right.
It's not really money. You wouldn't pay 5 cents for coffee.
You're not going to get rich off of that either. Yeah.
So I'm going to work with the Ranzo Recovery Group, and we are going to go to Lamplighter Coffee Shop, and we are going to learn how to roast coffee and learn like that whole process, and then make a custom coffee roast that we're calling Recovery Roast. And then we're going to build some sort of coffee bicycles that we're going to ride around town and around the country, offering people 5-cent coffee in exchange for conversation.
In exchange for conversation.
Yeah.
So what's going to be the equivalent of the mason jar? What are you going to drink the coffee out of?
So this is a cup from IKEA. It's 69 cents, which is cheaper than the mason jar. So I'm already ahead. In fact, so what I'm going to do is I'll have 2 of these mugs, and then a little coaster made of cedar, which the shelves in free ice water are made of. So they'll be, rim to rim, and they actually sit the same height as the ice water jar. So that is the package. So if you were to participate, and without me, you would receive that kit, some of that coffee, and you could sit down and have a conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
So same basic conversation, but over coffee.
Over coffee. And my thinking about it is, it's really hard to talk to people over ice water in January. So, I have to find a balance to the thing.
Yeah. And coffee and conversation just go together.
Coffee and conversation go together. And it's also this balancing of, you drink ice water when it's hot. And you need to be cooled down, and you need to calm down. And you drink coffee when you need energy, and you need to wake up, and you need to be on it.
Right.
So, from about September until May, I'm drinking a lot of coffee so that I can be who I am. And then from May to, September, I don't drink that much coffee because I got a lot of energy from the beautiful sun, and I got to drink that ice water to keep me cool.
Right.
So, you know what I think? I think we're pretty close to.
We're probably pretty close
to time.
I think, right. Are we going to?
You did want to talk a little bit about.
I want to talk about this class.
Yeah, that's right. She wanted to meta.
I want to make it meta.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you want to know?
So.
And you can also ask Jill. She knows a few things about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're sitting here. So this whole conversation is part of a class, and I would even go out, dare say that it's an experimental class.
It's an experimental class. It is a tier 2 pilot. It's never been done before. And we have a grand plan for what it could be, but it can't be what it could be without the people in this audience who are making it what it can be. Was that
you get that? Okay. So the class is called Passport.
The class is called RVArts Cultural Passport.
Right.
So
RVArts
and
Cultural Passport.
Like there's the hashtag for it is RVARTS. But RV is it RVArts? No, it's RVArts.
I think we've decided that you have to say the A.
It's RVArts, right? Because RVArts doesn't mean anything. It's RVA, as in Richmond, Virginia, arts.
Right.
But the hashtag for it is RVA, and then the A is shared.
Right.
And then it's RTS. We take the last RTS.
I'm going to take the coffee away from you now. Okay, so, and it is both, it exists like so many of your other projects, it exists both virtually and physically.
Yes,
so part of it is about conversation like we are having right now.
Certainly.
With the students in the class as our live audience.
Yes.
But then part of it is also virtual, so you meet with them online.
Yes. So it's a hybrid course, meaning that it meets physically and then it also meets virtually.
Right.
And the virtual part so far is the creation and maintenance of a pretty active arts calendar for Richmond,
right.
For the Richmond community.
Right.
So
which doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. So each week, students in this class are posting upcoming events that are happening around the community, And not only there are events that are school sponsored and larger events that are happening in the city, but there are also smaller events that they know about. So we're getting a really interesting mix of events that you can dig into and find out what's happening today. You go to the site and it comes up and it says today, and there are 3 or 4 things that you can go to. This week, there are 8 things you can go to. Ongoing, there are all these things that you can go to. And it's not limited to VCU Arts or any specific department. It's all things art in the Richmond area.
Right.
Yeah, so that's something that they're doing on their own outside of class time. And they're writing responses to readings, then they're commenting on each other's responses. And the level of discussion and engagement for me so far has been really, really surprising. Because sometimes, a reading day in a course, you come in and either people haven't done their reading or they've done their reading, but they don't feel comfortable talking about their reading. And what's happening here is there's just a lot of really interesting dialogue going on about the Astor Gates and in terms of the things that we're reading. So
cool.
I'm really happy with it. And we, one of the things that you do with an online course that we have to negotiate is what's public and what's private. And we have this public calendar, so people are posting events that are public. And then the part of the course where the people are writing reading responses and responding to each other is private. Right. So students can interact with each other without fear of it being a broadcast. And then as students attend things, they're writing reviews that will go public after we workshop them. They'll be doing artists and interesting people interviews, and then each of them will be doing feature articles about upcoming events.
Wow.
So
that's great.
So the goal is to make it the one-stop shop for all things awesome.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And the other thing that's happening is apparently there's a television show where there are 2 people in conversation in front of some sort of plant in Oompa Loompaville. So what else do you want to know? Because we could also take questions.
Do we? I know. We probably didn't leave much time.
No, we have. They're here until 7. We have plenty of time.
Excellent. We can edit this down later.
That's right. We can edit it down into 15 minutes. They can just cut out everything I said. So, what do you guys have questions? Of course you do, because you were forced to make them. There's like 85 questions out there. If your question was not answered by our guest, what do you want to know?
I have a question. I have a question for you in relation to the Free Ice Water Project.
Sure.
And the trouble with the toxic water in Flint, Michigan that they're having. Do you know what?
Oh, of course I do.
Okay.
Yes.
And other areas in the country.
Yes.
Listening to you talk about it, it takes on a preciousness, I guess, just like pure water.
Well, I
don't
mean,
know how you feel about
well, one thing that the water that is used in free ice water is tap water. So it is definitely tap water. I mean, it's tap water, and it's tap water for a variety of reasons. One of which is it's also a response to bottled water. It's about and the commodification of water and how water is necessary for life. I mean, that's kind of an underlying component of the project. And so the Flint water crisis makes this impossible in Flint. Right? It just is impossible. And that the basic level of people's ability to survive and live, the base government responsibility is to provide water that's drinkable. Right? So when things like that happen, there's a challenge as an artist to be able to respond to those things without taking on every crisis, right? So I've applied for grants. I applied for a grant as a resident at the Glacier National Park. And in thinking about like what is this project about there's plenty of different ways it can be, but it still has to come back to people's experiences. So it can't be about climate change, although there's a little bit of something there could be something there.
Mm-hmm.
It still has to be about interpersonal and direct engagement between two people. So, yeah. What else? What do you want to know? You have to. This is now it's a conversation with you. We won't make you get in the chairs. They were the first people to use these chairs on the first day of class. That was some pretty good conversation.
Yeah.
I was entertained. What do you want to know?
So I have a question for you guys. How will you measure success of the Master RVArts calendar? Like, how are you going to know that you're getting the word out and attracting more people? I guess you're doing things like monitoring how many views and hits your sites are getting, or
I've been in events for a while now. I've met a Living Arts, so I kind of know the drill as far as about what to expect participation-wise for any given thing. So I think if there was an increase in this age population at those events or more events, that would be that would be it for me. To be, I don't know, at some random thing and have 20 million would be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
What is your favorite and like most frustrating part about your job?
is that for me or for John?
For both, I guess.
For you.
What's my favorite and my most frustrating part of my job?
This is soda, not beer. Just so you know.
My
Recovery.
I would say working with artists might be the answer to both of those questions.
Working with curators.
No, and it's funny because there are obviously lots of curators who actually don't work with living artists, right? Like there are curators of antiquities and there are curators of old master painting, and so for me, and I studied art history and knew kind of had a sense that I wanted to work in museums, but at the time by the time I realized that I wanted to work with contemporary art, the reason remains because I wanted to work with contemporary artists. So that's probably, I would say that's my favorite part of the job. And I have a particular interest and career focus on emerging to mid-career artists because I find that really rewarding, that sense of, working with an artist who isn't already overexposed or, someone who really, you feel like your work is actually giving, him or her an opportunity to get the work out there at the same time that, so you're sort of serving the artist by helping the artist get their work out, and you're also serving audiences by making the introduction to the work. So that's for me, that's the most rewarding thing, when you can sort of, it's almost like making an introduction. The frustrations, I mean, there's lots of frustrations, that are probably more about working at nonprofits than I mean, there's always like a lack of funds and resources, and, you have to be really scrappy, and sometimes you wish like the staff was 3 times as big, and that kind of thing.
Of course, not next door. You don't want 3 times.
Our staff is 3 times as big as it was a year ago, but we need more. So Yeah, I think that's sort of it. Is that often, almost always, if there's a bug in nonprofits, like you have to deal with not having a lot of funds or having to scrape by, and like shoestring budgets and that kind of thing. But
What else? What else do you want now?
they're good.
They are good.
Yeah. They know everything.
They know everything they need to know.
Someone back here has a question.
Oh, yeah, good. What's the question?
I guess the monuments on Monument.
Yeah.
What do you think about them? Do you think
And you are being videotaped, and
I know.
you are a spokesman for the ICA.
I know. It's
I don't
such a
think she's gonna
loaded.
tell you when the ICA opens.
No, I can't tell you that. And no, it's a really loaded question. I think it's time to rethink those monuments. But it's hard. There's obviously a whole set of related questions that don't have easy answers. So, in terms of public art, I definitely would like to see, some other types of public art and some fresher types of public art in Richmond. But as far as the history that is embedded in those monuments and there's a whole set of very complicated issues that those are conversations that we should be having for sure. And I think that, the ICA is actually thinking about ways that we can play a role and help start some conversations and perhaps even moderate some conversations. But I don't know that there are easy answers. But just because something isn't easy doesn't mean you shouldn't be talking about it.
Well, to me, your experience in working with temporary transitory work, there's lots of possibilities of different ways to question and engage with the history that's around us in Richmond.
Right.
And it's not just a monument. There's tremendous amounts of history that's celebrated and also hidden.
Yeah.
So, if the question is should we remove the monuments on Monument Avenue? She's not going to answer that. And I'm mixed on it because I feel like the monuments on Monument Avenue are part of what this place is. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where, it's a reminder that not too long ago, the city of Richmond and its people, valued that and made that happen at a time that it shouldn't have been happening, right? Yeah. So it does serve as a reminder that we have to deal with the past and have to be able to engage with it and be in conversation with it, and to erase it is to deny both the history that they're trying to celebrate and the history that celebration is a problem in some places. So
right.
That's a good.
I think that's a good answer.
I don't know. Think about it. What do you think? What do people here think about the monuments?
Oh, I was going to ask a question.
Oh, ask a question. Yeah. Please.
So, if the ICA is going to sponsor these conversations being started, who is going to be taking a part in these conversations?
That's a great question. I think that type of conversation has to be community-wide. So, this is something that we're thinking about and having internal conversations, because I think, right, if you tackle a subject like that, you have to do it really responsibly, and you have to make sure that, that there are a lot of voices involved in that conversation and people are coming together, everyone's at the table to talk about it. So I think we're doing a lot of sort of internal soul searching and thinking about how to best do that, because it doesn't make sense for it just to be here's what the ICA thinks. I mean that's not helping anybody. So.
And the ICA doesn't exist to think yet. I mean, it's
Right.
what do you mean?
Right, yeah.
I mean, it does have
We're a handful of people right now,
a handful
but
of people
yeah,
that who's generating their history. And,
yeah.
But with what I think about the monuments.
Oh, you're going to answer, yeah. Good.
Yeah, I might as well.
I'm
Personally, I think they're awesome. I mean, I don't like the history. The history is awful, but like it's so interesting. At the same time, like to see that when is a monument built of a loser? They lost and they have heroic statues, and it's just every time I live right in front of it, and I think it's the Jeb Stewart one, and every time I see it, I'm just like, I just think so much,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about with them, and they're just massive. I mean, very beautiful.
I can guarantee you that the ICA is not going to be commissioning gigantic
Equestrian
men
horses.
on horses. But I wouldn't want to speak for you.
Never say never. I don't know.
Yes.
This is kind of a question for both of you, but in your view, what do you think the relationship between the ICA and VCU is going to be like, and what interactions we're looking to have?
Well, before you answer, because you have an idea, I'll just talk about my own personal experience with my interactions with the ICA, is that my Art Foundations courses have been involved with the ICA. Every time I've done anything, the ICA is like, that's interesting, why don't you bring them over here? Why don't we do this? So the first time I taught in Art Foundations, they came over and planted the garden at the ICA. So there's a huge tomato patch, and my Art Foundation students planted, each of them planted a tomato, right?
Right.
So the ICA right now doesn't have a building and doesn't have a physical plant to occupy itself, and they are very willing to be engaged with. That's my experience.
Yeah.
So this is like the time to get involved in what they're doing, volunteer for them, because they need all the help they can get, and you're in on the ground floor, right? So
Yeah. I mean, we're part of VCU, and that's we're integrated into the VCU community, and I think I talked earlier about how there's lots of points of connection with the School of the Arts, and we've only just begun. And I think, those connections can be relatively modest things like planting tomatoes, or, it can really grow from there into something much bigger. We want to do more residencies like we were talking about with Nir. And as I mentioned, we're thinking about how to connect with the university beyond the School of the Arts. How do we connect with the med school, and how do we connect with humanities, and how do we connect with, engineering, and it's a whole set of challenges. But at the same time, we don't want to be seen as existing solely for the VCU community. So, it's really our hope that, if you live in Richmond, but you're not part of VCU, you're not affiliated with VCU, that you still feel as welcome and as interested in what's happening there. And then, we want to attract people from beyond Richmond. So we're hoping we'll help be sort of a lure for tourists, to come visit Richmond. So it's
international art tour.
International art tourists, yeah. So that's a lot of different audiences. So you have to think about how you can appeal to those different groups. But VCU is definitely, I would say, it's our core.
And in this class, that's what we're doing too, right? We have a VCU-centric focus because we have access and knowledge about the things that are happening at VCU, but we want to make this calendar available, to everyone, and get them involved outside of VCU. and also about events that are elsewhere, not just here. Well, I think we should wrap it up.